You can tell by your tan.
Friday. Yeah.
And I just got back from Canada, your stomping ground.
Yep.
So we've been all over the place. And Ken just landed in the United States a little bit ago. He's been down in Australia. So yeah, we've been kind of trouncing around all over the place, doing different things. But.
Yep.
Yeah, so if you guys want to follow along, you can do that live. You can watch on Ken Ham's Facebook. You can also watch on the Answers in Genesis Facebook or the Answers in Genesis YouTube channel. And we do ask that you at least turn your volume down if you do follow along with that. You can actually comment and that sort of thing as well, but it's good to turn it down because there's a little bit of a delay and a feedback loop.
My phone is telling me we are already live.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
So can someone in the booth up there tell me if that's accurate?
Yeah, mine
I'm not
says we're
sure.
live here
It's
too.
saying Ken Ham is live now.
Yeah.
All right.
So should we get started? Thumbs up if we should get started. Up in the sound booth. I'm not seeing it. Thumbs up. Okay, we'll get started. All right, we're going to start a little bit early today. Welcome to Answers News for the 25th of November. I think this is a first that's happened.
Yeah,
so.
that's right. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, well, we have a live studio audience if you guys want, who were chatting with a minute ago. If you guys want to clap and say hi.
Let's hear you.
Yay.
There they are.
That's right.
All right, so we are here, Bodie Hodge, Dr. Gabriella Haynes, Avery Foley, your host today. Didn't even have time to turn my phone on silent before we went live. Goodness. So Gabby's just back from Brazil. You just got back on Friday.
Yes.
You had a nice time seeing family.
Amazing
and
time with my family, my
she
friends.
sent us all these pictures of her at the beach, and she's like, "Oh, my life is so hard." And we're all like,
Yeah, just suffering so much. And my husband's like, "It's freezing here." Yeah, but it was amazing. A very good time with them.
Good.
Almost 2 years. I haven't gone there, so it was a very good time to be with them there
awesome.
and eat all my favorite food. Oh my goodness, it was awesome.
And you just got back from Canada.
I did. I whipped up there real quick at Niagara Falls. The Answers in Genesis Canada Ministry had a big conference. We had somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 400 people.
Awesome.
Oh, wow.
And it was live streamed. You can find those on the Answers in Genesis Canada Facebook page if you want to go back and look for those. But it was a really good conference. I chatted with a lot of people.
Good.
But I was actually filling in for Ken Ham. Ken was going to be there, but for those of you who don't know, Ken's mother did die in Australia. He was able to get down there in time. So was his brother Stephen, which many of you may be familiar with Stephen. He worked here at the Ministry of Answers in Genesis for a number of years before he took a position as a local pastor. But the entire family was able to be there when she passed. But a wonderful testimony on Ken's blog if you guys want to follow that and watch a video about Norma.
There's a little tribute to her on there. So it's good to have you guys back from foreign parts.
Yeah.
And all right, so we've got a couple things to talk about here. So we have our Christmas programs starting at the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum on the 29th. So coming up really fast here. So we have Christmas Town at the Creation Museum, which features a beautiful garden of lights with hundreds of thousands of lights, a live nativity. My husband and I are actually playing Mary and Joseph one of the nights for the live nativity.
I did that.
So
I did
instead of
that one
looking
year.
7 months pregnant, I'm going to try and look postpartum. So we'll see how that goes. But we're doing that, so that's going to be fun. We're just one night, we're doing that. But we really encourage people to come out for that. It's a free event. You just pay for parking. And while that's going on, we have other special things like concerts. And one of the things we have here at the Creation Museum is Christmas Truths for Families, which are some workshops around Christmas and the true meaning of Christmas, celebrating Christ. And those are running December 3rd through the 6th at 5 o'clock. So you can join us for those, and it's free as well. And Bodie, you can tell us more about this one, Long Foretold, which is going to be here at the Creation Museum on December 6th.
Yeah, Long Foretold. This is the kids from 12 Stones Christian Academy. A lot of times when you do like Christmas plays or Easter things, a lot of times there's plenty that are out there that are just modified that different Christian organizations use, and I know schools oftentimes use those. But this is actually totally written just for them. And it's actually following the wise men and following it through. And it's pretty unique. It's pretty fascinating. So hopefully the kids do a really good job with it. I know they've been working on it for a while. But
yeah, I got to
December
speak for their
6th,
chapel, and I got to hear a little snippet of some of the songs and stuff, and it sounded really good. So
yeah, they're going to do really good with it, I think. So
yeah, so Bodie was telling us a little bit about it before we went live, and it sounds really interesting. So if you'd like to come December 6th, again, that's another free event being hosted here at the Creation Museum. And then, of course, we also have Christmas Time down at the Ark Encounter, where we'll have beautiful lights down there, and we have have the Gleis skating rink open, and you can rent skates and go skating, and they'll have the Encounter the Wonder show inside the Answer Center, and all kinds of really fun stuff going on. That's free as well. Just pay for parking. So we'd love to have you come out for our Christmas program starting day after Thanksgiving.
All right, I'm seeing people hop on from all over the place. New York, England, Maryland, just to give you a taste. So they're
Someone asked, will the
all over.
nativity scene with me be recorded? It's just me sitting there smiling at a baby. So it's not going to be recorded. But it's always fun to have the live nativity. And there's live
Mary was
animals like
blonde that
camels.
time,
And I think I'll have a thing on so you can't see my blonde hair. All right. So the first, our fun item here before we get into the other news, 9-year-old child prodigy set to become youngest university grad in the world. So this kid is 9 years old, and he's set to graduate from university with a degree in electrical engineering.
Good
Wow.
on you.
Yeah.
Now, you did engineering.
I did engineering, yeah.
Would
that's
you
a
have
lot
been
of
able to
work.
do it when you were 9, do you think?
You know, when I was 9, maybe, I don't know.
I think you were out hunting squirrels when you were 9.
When I was at the university, there was a girl that was 16 years old that I was taking classes with, and she was about to graduate.
Wow,
And
okay.
it was interesting because she would take like 28, 30 hours. And I'm like, I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to get through. And they're like, no, we don't let you do it. Only special people. I'm like, thanks. I guess I'm not
Sorry,
special.
Bodie.
But yeah, I would have actually loved to do that because, you know, just get through it a lot quicker.
Well, he finished high school in 18 months, and then after he finishes this, he's going to go into a PhD program in electrical engineering while he's working on a PhD in medicine, because why not, right? So apparently his parents weren't the first people to notice that their child was exceptionally gifted when it comes to intellect. It was his grandparents and his teachers who noticed, but the mom still takes credit for it. She says she ate a lot of fish while she was pregnant. So maybe I need to eat more fish.
Yeah. You know, I read another article, and I pulled it up, even though it's not a news item. This one goes back to 2016. But it says, why do few child progenies grow up to be geniuses? Apparently, about 95% of the kids who are child geniuses grow up to be normal people. They don't do anything really extraordinary outside the fact that they're brilliant at, you know, repeating Mozart or going into a science field, that sort of thing. But one of the things it says is what seems to hold them back is that they do not learn to be original. In many cases, these kids, they master, say, you know, piano or whatever it might be, or they can, you know, perform Mozart brilliantly, or when it comes to a science field, they just absorb the knowledge that's there, but what they don't learn is how to take that to the next step, how to compose an orchestra, you know, a new piece
That
of
doesn't
some
come
sort.
naturally to them
No,
like
it
absorbing
doesn't.
information does,
And,
right?
and so, you know, that's my encouragement here, you know. I want to encourage these guys, you know, to think outside the box, you know, become a little bit more original. Maybe that'll keep you in that 5%.
So we'll see what this young man does, but pretty cool. So he's set to break the record by 1 year. 10 years is the current record for graduating.
And I understand
from
like being brilliant and just being normal.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Good on you.
All right, so this one's right in your field of study. Feathered dinosaur fossils discovered in Australia. So this is talking about some feathers and what they're calling proto-feathers on dinosaurs that were found down under in Australia, which
Is Ken a fossil from Australia?
You're gonna get in trouble.
You better
I'll
hope
be
he's
in
not
trouble if I don't
watching.
watch that.
Yes, you're gonna get in trouble.
So what did you think about this one, Gabby?
Well, it's just interesting how the paper talks about dinosaur, etc. But when you go to the paper,
Right, as opposed to the news article.
That they publish, they only found feathers.
So they didn't find like a dinosaur
No,
fossil.
they only found the feathers, and then from those feathers, they just talking about it was from dinosaurs. But the point is, today, what they do is they think that dinosaurs and birds, they're the same thing.
Right.
So even for the sake of the argument, you cannot really talk
It's
to them.
really hard to distinguish if they're
Right.
talking about a dinosaur or a
Yes,
bird.
because at first
Because
you
they're calling birds dinosaurs.
Yeah.
That's really what they're doing. Yeah.
So that's the problem, that you cannot even really argue and talk to them about that, because you need to ask them, okay, define dinosaur, define bird, and then you can kind of understand what they're talking about. But yes, the whole paper just talks about feathers, and the whole structure of that feather, it's of modern birds.
So-
Right, yeah.
So it's got the barbules and everything right along it.
So, but the point is, they're always trying to put dinosaurs in the story, you know, to
Yeah.
kind of put them.
And then the
those
proto feathers are talking about. What are these? What are the proto feathers?
Yeah, I saw
The
that.
proto feathers, it's just like one is structure that they find in the fossils that they think that it could be something like feathers. That could it doesn't have
Like the beginning of
yes,
feathers.
the beginning
or
of
some-
feathers.
some
It
sort
doesn't
of
have the
filament
whole
they wanna have.
structure of a modern feather. So they say
Right.
the proto feather because it's just like the beginning of feather. But
Because they have to have that in their story. If it's going to
Yes.
change from scales to feathers, you got to
Right.
yeah,
have
you gotta
something
have
in
to
there.
have.
yes.
Now,
Yeah.
what's interesting is scales and feathers grow totally different. Scales and scutes are, you know, they're like folds in the skin,
Yeah.
where a feather actually
Right,
grows out
in
of a
the follicle.
follicle.
Yeah,
It-
very
it grows
complex
totally
structure.
different
Yeah.
out of this.
And the point is not even you having the feather, but you have to have other structures to maintain the feather in your
Right.
body.
Yeah.
And yet these feathers were totally disconnected from any dinosaur fossil.
Right. Yes.
So they just found feathers and they're just assuming it went to a dinosaur.
Right.
One of the things it says in the article here, it says smaller dinosaurs had proto-feathers likely used to keep warm according to experts. Now, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, hold on, this is a problem because, you know, reptilian creatures are largely ectothermic. Basically, they take in heat from the
Cold-blooded
sun and,
the
you know, other
vernacular.
means, that's right, from the air. But you know, where mammals, you know, with their physiology, they're more endothermic. Basically, we generate our own heat.
Right.
And we use that hair or whatever it is, you know, or in the case of certain animals that are totally covered with fur to help keep that heat in, you know. So it's an insulating layer. If you put something like that on a reptile, it's actually a massive detriment because it doesn't allow the
absorb
heat to
heat.
get to
Right.
them.
Right.
Yes.
So it causes a big problem. So to me, I look at that and I go, oh, that's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, and what they say it was used for insulation is just because in this case those feathers would not be used for flying. It's
Yeah.
proto feathers, so
Yeah.
they have to make those feathers to have a job, to
Yeah,
have
yeah, they have to give a
function.
purpose to it,
Yeah,
yeah,
purpose.
function.
Right, yeah,
So
yeah.
they're just like insulation, but they
know-
cannot know that. How can they know?
Right, that's an
Yeah,
interpretation.
Yeah,
right, they're
that's
just
totally
guessing.
interpretation.
In fact,
yes.
I would even go so far as to question if that's really dinosaur fuzz or if that's dinosaur hair or proto feathers, whatever they want to call that. Evolutionists, you know, going back, you know, almost the year 2000, I got an article here from 2003 with an evolutionary biologist, Dr. Alan Fiducia, is a paleo bird expert. And he points out that he believes that this really isn't dinosaur fuzz or proto feathers. What he's saying is that it looks like preserved skin fibers or collagen fibers. Collagen's like-
Degraded a little
Yeah,
bit.
degraded.
right, it's like the glue that holds your tissue and muscles together, and you're seeing that preserved. So I mean, this has been around for quite some time. What do we keep seeing? We keep seeing people say, let's just ignore this and presume
Right.
it is because they have to have that in the story.
Yeah, it's not that easy. Sometimes what happens is when they find some fossils of dinosaurs, they say that dinosaur it's a bird, and when they found
Right,
a bird, they
yeah.
say that it's a dinosaur. So it's really easy to put feathers in this dinosaur because it's not actually a
'Cause it's a
dinosaur,
bird.
it's a bird. So that's the whole point.
Yeah.
It's really
That would be
confusing.
like somebody saying, you know, humans evolved into squirrels. Oh, look, we found a squirrel. Oh, therefore we found a human.
Yes.
Oh, we found a human, therefore it's a squirrel.
Yes, it's circular reasoning.
You know,
Yeah.
it's crazy when they do that sort of thing, but that's what we're seeing.
Yep.
So,
So speaking of the evolutionary worldview, this article, it's called Darwinism. Parents told to let their baby die rather than seek medical care. So this is out of Ohio, and there's a family that has a baby that's suffering from several rare birth defects. And so they've been fundraising to try and help cover some of the costs that their insurance isn't covering for the treatment this baby needs. Therefore, the baby's 4 months old. And when they put some signs up around the town, you know, advertising for a fundraiser, and the next morning found these signs, I think 3 different signs posted that said, "Stop asking for money, let the baby die, it's called Darwinism, happy holidays." And when I saw this, like, it's shocking and it's horrific, but it's also completely in line with the
Consistent,
evolutionary
yeah.
worldview. Because in an evolutionary worldview, it is survival of the fittest.
It's just an animal.
Yeah, so why try and keep someone who is not quote unquote fit alive? That's not how Darwinian evolution is supposed to work, supposed to regress. And certainly whoever wrote this sign is not the first individual to think this way.
Oh,
the
yeah.
history of eugenics here in the United States, same kind of thinking. Nazi Germany, same kind of thinking. This person is taking their evolutionary worldview and applying it
In
to this
action,
situation in a
in
really horrible, very uncompassionate way.
you know, my guess is that the person who wrote this sign, you know, they were kind of a helpless babe at one point too that
Oh,
needed
yeah.
money.
Probably.
that probably relied on their parents to spend money on
Yes.
them to keep them
Oh, yeah.
alive. And I'm sure that they like to be compensated every time they do something.
Yeah, and
You know-
sorry.
Doesn't make any sense. But.
It makes me really sad because I have a baby and he's 6 months old, and it's almost the age of these baby, which
a little bit older than this
yeah.
little baby.
And it's just what I would die for my kid.
Right, yeah.
You know, like every parent would do that. And right now it's just like, well, just let it die. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. If they don't care about a life, what else are they gonna care? Nothing.
And it's not like
Nothing
every evolutionist is going to think this way, of course. Most
Right.
evolutionists thankfully don't. But in order to do that, they can't be consistent with their own worldview.
No.
They have to borrow from a biblical worldview in order to not think the way that this individual
Right.
thinks. Because this is the natural consequence of an evolutionary worldview.
Right.
Right. Except for the part that says happy holidays.
Except for that
Oh,
part.
yeah.
You know, why would they say happy? You know,
Right.
in an evolutionary worldview, there's, you know, happy and sadness are just chemical reactions in your brain. It's
Right.
pointless. And then holidays
Very
are holy
subjective.
days. But it's interesting they say happy holidays, considering we're so close to Christmas and stuff, and we happen to have a happy holidays booklet, by the way. I had one in my pocket here. These are great for witnessing, by the way.
We have those on our store. It's a brand new resource from Bodie. All right, so another evolutionary story here. Scientists just reconstructed the family tree of the biggest giant ape that ever lived. So this is referring to an extinct ape called Gigantopithecus blacki.
What was that?
Black guy?
What was that? Can you?
Maybe it's Jag. I'm not sure.
Gigantopithecus.
Yeah, you do it again.
Gigantopithecus.
There you go.
I think that's how it is.
There. We'll go with that. So this is an ape that they were able to extract some proteins from the tooth enamel, and were able to take a look at some of that and figure out that it's probably related to orangutans. And it was 10 feet tall and weighed 1,300 pounds full grown, is what they're estimating based on the size of the jawbone that they found. So it was not small,
Yeah.
to say the least. You wouldn't want to necessarily meet an angry one of these in the jungle.
I like the fact that they find an ape and they say, oh, it's not in the human line.
Yeah,
they put it in an
they
ape line,
actually
yeah.
just called it an ape.
They're not trying to
which
monkey
is-
around with it.
But unfortunately, they're saying that it's 2 million years old, the material that
the
they
proteins,
found.
yeah.
Yeah, the
Time.
protein. But they also say that this material decays really fast.
Because it's found in a hot, humid climate, which
Yeah.
obviously you want a
Well,
colder climate to preserve
That's
these
right. That's
kinds
what
of
it
things,
says
not a
right here.
hot climate.
Genetic material this old has never been retrieved from a warm and humid climate before, with such material decays faster.
They
Well,
thought
ding,
before
ding,
it would
ding,
only
ding,
be about
ding.
10,000 years. So they went from 10,000 years to 2 million.
million.
Bit of a
Well,
jump.
what they
It's a
should have
little
done
bit-
was question the date right off the
Yeah.
bat.
Right.
But they don't
Right.
do that
No, they
because the
don't.
dates are
Proteins
unquestionable
don't last
there.
2 million years.
No,
like that should,
not at all.
Yeah,
No.
I'm sure Georgia,
Even
if she
in
was
the-
on here, would definitely agree with that from
Yeah.
her expertise standpoint. They do
Even
not
in the
last that long.
perfect environment, you're not gonna eat.
No,
it's
let alone
impossible.
in a
Yeah.
cave in a hot, humid climate.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, these teeth, the jaw and teeth, were originally found in a medicine shop in Hong Kong, being sold as dragon's teeth.
Yeah.
But not from a dragon, from a very massive extinct ape. But this ape's just part of the ape kind, just part of the variety that God created that has gone extinct since the time of when this creature lived. But yeah, just another variety of the great ape kind.
Yeah, someone
Yes.
says earlier in my comment about humans and squirrels, they say that sounds a little squirrely.
It's a
Good on
one.
them.
And people here are commenting about King Kong and Bigfoot. So you never know. Something like that maybe, gave rise to some of those different legends and things. You
Yeah.
never know.
Right.
All right, this next one here. World's largest higher education union says anyone can identify as black regardless of skin color. So the world's largest higher education union is out of the UK, and they released a statement. They were talking. It was this report about whether or not men should be allowed to identify as women, despite their biology, and they said yes, and they said that they have a long history of enabling members to self-identify, whether that is being black, disabled, LGBT+, or women.
So you can identify as disabled, whether you want to or not, and go take the front parking spaces.
That's just ridiculous.
And when
Absolutely
And
ridiculous.
then when the police come, you're just like, well, I'm disabled.
I self-identify as disabled, or I
yes.
self-identify
That's
as
so disrespectful.
whatever. It really is.
Yeah.
And it's just, you look through this and it's that total, and I mean, if you're going to take their thinking, if a man can identify as a woman or a woman can identify as a man, why stop there, right? Of course it's going to continue.
Right.
So it's just taking their logic a little bit further
When you're
to
paying
completely
your
ignore
bills,
anything about biology.
when you're paying your bills to, these different colleges or something, can you say, well, I identify these pennies as dollars.
Yeah, I like that. Like that.
They might not like that
I
too much.
identify
Pay
my
rent.
F's as A's. I had
Pay
a
rent.
really good GPA.
I identify myself as someone that I paid the rent for the whole year. What's the problem?
It's like, where do you stop? If you can completely ignore
Right.
reality, you can completely ignore
Yes.
biology, you can completely ignore all of that,
Yeah.
why stop with that? They don't mention, I thought this was interesting, they don't have age on their list.
That's a
They're
good
not
point.
quite ready to go to the point where you can self-identify your age, but why not? If you can
Otherwise, I was
self-identify
the youngest person to
your-
graduate
Yeah,
college.
yeah, exactly.
I was only 4.
Like, if you can self-identify everything else, why not? Like, it's biology, just
Right.
like your sex, your sex is biology, and just
Yeah.
like your ethnicity is biology.
Hey,
but
you know what this shows? This shows a failure of the state education system. I mean, if people can't come out and tell the difference between male and female, for example,
Right.
what kind of education system
Or
is that?
able and disable, yes.
I mean, they're opposing biology, now they're opposing anthropology. What won't they do? But see, male and female are biological traits, are physical, aspects here. But they're wanting to say, no, you can't look at that. It has to be something spiritual. It's your mindset.
right, yeah, it's how
which
you
is not
feel about
material.
yourself.
Right, and now they're starting to say the same thing about darker skin versus lighter skin or anything in between. Dark brown, light brown. Your world's somewhat brownish. Melanin that appears in our skin. But what they're saying is, well, no, it has nothing to do with physical anymore. It has to do with your spiritual mind state. This stuff just becomes crazy, and yet that
Yeah,
goes against their
it does.
materialistic worldview that says there is nothing spiritual in their
Right,
material.
that's
so
a good point,
It
yeah.
goes to show
Yeah.
the contradiction within their
Right.
own worldview.
One of the professors who's part of this union said this is anti-intellectual propaganda, which is pretty
Sounds
accurate
about right, yeah.
to what that is. All right, so this next one here is a little bit disturbing. We're not going to go into a lot of details, but just so you know before we get to it, if you have children listening or just so you know about that. Judge rules against Deladian pro-lifers who exposed Planned Parenthood sale of baby body parts. So this, back in 2015, we talked about this. I wrote an article for our website about this. Basically, this undercover group called the Center for Medical Progress, and this particular journalist, as well as some other journalists, came out with some absolutely stomach-turning, horrific videos of Planned Parenthood executives haggling over the price of the parts of unborn children that were harvested during abortions. I mean, I had to watch these videos in order to write my article, and I was just sobbing. It was horrible, absolutely horrible. And of course, Planned Parenthood sued the Center for Medical Progress because they were not happy that these recordings were released to the public, because obviously people were outraged and really upset to see what Planned Parenthood is actually doing and what was really going on behind closed doors there. And unfortunately, a judge and a jury just ruled that these particular journalists are guilty of multiple crimes and have to pay millions of dollars in damages to Planned Parenthood.
This judge has close ties to Planned
Very
Parenthood
close ties
too,
with
by the
Planned
way.
Parenthood. They asked the judge to excuse himself from the case, and he would not.
And he wouldn't do it. And he spent apparently 6 weeks influencing the jury about certain things as well, which is kind of odd.
Yeah.
So I mean,
not
that
really
happens.
supposed to do
Now, am I right? Journalists do this kind of thing all the time. They
Yeah.
get undercover video.
They
all
go
the time.
undercover all the time
Yeah.
They
in
come
order
here
to
to the
expose
museum
stuff.
and interview us,
Oh,
and all
yeah.
of a sudden, next thing you know, they were apparently, videoing us, and we didn't even know. That happens all the time because that's what they do, investigative journalism.
Yeah, that's how you do investigative journalism. If you tell people you're a journalist, that kind of undermines the whole
So,
investigative part.
It's
Right.
kind of an attack on the freedom of press, freedom of
Yeah.
religion, freedom of speech.
And an absolute just, like, Planned Parenthood is the one that is
did
doing
wrong.
the wrong thing. They're the
Yeah.
ones that are selling the parts of unborn children and discussing how they
And
can,
they admitted it,
they
too, in
can
there, in the
twist
court
their
case.
different practices in abortion so that they get better baby parts that are worth more money. Like, horrible, horrifying stuff. And yet they're the ones
But they
getting
don't touch-
money.
they don't touch on
because
those. They're like,
yeah,
no.
oh no. And even
Yeah.
when you see this reported on in the mainstream media, they just sort of brush over that really, really fast and then move on to talk about these horrible undercover journalists who did all this illegal trespassing and
Yeah.
whatnot.
And right here, they talk so many times about damages. What kind of Planned Parenthood damage they're doing?
Yeah, damage
know?
to every single child and woman who walks out of their clinic.
And family and
Yeah.
Yeah.
society, everything. And it just,
Now this is being appealed, though. Is that correct?
It is,
Yeah.
yes. They're going to appeal it, so hopefully
They
it'll go
have
to a
to.
more just
Yeah.
judge and jury who will make a
Yeah.
decision that isn't
They have
that
to.
honors the freedoms that we enjoy here in America and honors those First Amendment rights, as well as the sanctity of human life and what the horrible things that Planned Parenthood is doing, and they don't deserve
Sometimes
damages.
when I'm reading those articles, I'm like,
Yeah.
isn't my English really working? Because, like,
Yeah.
would you think that you would be reading something like that?
No, you really,
It's just crazy. The sale of baby body parts.
yeah, it's
just-
horrible.
Horrible. Yes, that's the word.
So, well, hopefully we'll see that get appealed, and the appeal will go very well. So be praying
Yeah.
about that decision. So this next one, I thought it would be interesting to follow up with that one, with this one, from New Scientist, exclusive, humans placed in suspended animation for the first time. So in the last article, you see Planned Parenthood completely disregarding human life. It has no value except the money that particular abortion can bring in, and then the sale of the baby parts from that child can bring in. Just a human life is just a commodity to them. And then you get to this next article, which is talking about these doctors who are working to be able to basically place humans who have suffered a gunshot wound or a stab wound or something that has caused them to lose at least half their blood and have a heart attack. They'll die within minutes if they don't do something. But what can you do in minutes, right? There's nothing you can do. So what they're doing is replacing their blood with this ice cold saline solution that rapidly cools their body down, which allows them to be in this sort of suspended animation stage. They have 2 hours to get in there, do surgery, fix everything they can before they warm them back up, replace their blood, and then they have a better. They might survive. Otherwise, they have a 5% chance of
and
surviving.
they've had some success
So
with this.
yeah. So you basically see human life is just a commodity. We just care about how much money we can make. To these other doctors who are doing everything they can to save the
Yeah.
life of just one person.
Putting all the
It's
effort,
just
yeah.
it's so interesting to see the
They're
dichotomy
diametrically
there.
opposed, yeah.
Yeah.
Developing technology, developing a lot of knowledge.
to fight against the
fight,
curse and
yeah.
the evil actions that
Yeah.
humans do against each other, or accidents,
And see,
things
I'd
like
like
that.
to see this. I like to see people using the technology for good. And,
Yeah.
and that's what we're starting to see here. This actually reminded me of something, years ago, which, people have probably known about this for 30, 40 years now. It's a thing called mammalian diving response. Basically, if they're put into cold water, or, you can kind of mimic this a little bit, take cold water and splash it on your face, that actually triggers you to slow your heart rate down, reduces anxiety and that sort of thing. But apparently they've been able to do this with mammals and even with humans, which we share some physiology here, where you cool the body off quickly, and it actually puts your body into a slower state. And, it kind of helps people survive in certain cold water incidents and things like that.
Or if you
And
fall through the ice,
I wonder if,
something like
years ago, I used to think, boy, I wonder if they could utilize something like this for medical purposes, and lo and behold, they're now starting to do something like that by directly injecting
It's so
it.
neat to see what they're doing and to see
Yeah.
how that. So this is just a trial right now. They're testing it out to see how this is going to go and what effects it has once the patient is revived.
Right.
Again, so they're going to be releasing their full results the end of next year. They haven't released how many people have survived or anything like that from it, but
they made a statement here. I want to be clear that we're not trying to send people off to Saturn.
yes.
We're trying to buy ourselves a little bit more time to save lives. And
Yeah,
I
so
think
it's not
that's
some
a
like
good
weird
purpose.
sci-fi we're trying to, nothing like that. It's just an attempt to
Yeah.
save the lives of people who otherwise would have a very, very, very
And we are so
small
happy
chance
for
of
doctors
surviving.
like that.
Yeah.
So speaking of this life and death situation, another one from New Scientist that I thought tied in well with that one, why the line between life and death is now more blurred than ever. So this article was talking about how with all the modern technology we have today, like the previous article was talking about, it's a lot harder to tell the difference between life and death now. Before the 20th century, it was like, okay, you're not breathing and your heart isn't beating, you're dead. But now with ventilators and all these other different things, defibrillators,
Right.
it's a lot harder to tell.
To define, when's that point when you're-
to
when
find
you're
that
dead?
moment between life and death. And so
Yeah.
this article kind of goes through some of the difficulty and why different countries have different definitions of life and death,
And
even
how
different
it's been
states,
changing.
different hospitals.
I was actually fascinated reading this article because you know what, they are bringing up a good point. When is somebody really dead? As a result of some of the technology and that sort of thing. Now, of course, the Bible I think is still our standard in all matters.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I looked that up, and if you think about life isn't just a physical thing. We're in
Right,
a culture
yeah.
where people want to just look at things and say it's just physical.
Just
but God is
biology,
life.
just chemistry,
Yes.
but
Right. God is life, and yet He's spirit.
Yes.
Right,
Okay?
yeah.
We're made in the image of a spiritual God here, so we have a spiritual aspect to us.
God
So, I
breathed
mean,
the breath of life into Adam, and he became a living being.
that's right.
He
So,
needed more
I mean,
than
there's something to
biology.
that. Even when Jesus died on the cross, he yielded up his spirit, or the Bible says he gave up his spirit. In Genesis 7:22, it says, the breath of the spirit of life had left all things by that 150th day, right around then. So there's something to the aspect of life being connected to spirit. Now, these guys are looking at it from a physical sense. How do you really know that? We can't just, the spirit's gone.
Right, yeah, there's no measurement you can do to
there's
no
a lot
test.
to that. Of course, Hebrews talks about you die once and you face judgment, and that sort of thing. So, there are aspects, that you're kind of on that borderline going back and forth, but when do you decide? That's a great question here. So, in this article, as they ran through it, they're talking about how, there was a time when they started saying, well, if someone was brain dead, they would define that as being dead as well. But, I looked up, there's a big list of people who were brain dead patients who they thought were totally dead, and all of a sudden
They even said in some of their studies, if they do specific scans and they ask the patient, imagine that you're squeezing your right hand. They'll see the brain light up in the area. So, and that's not a routine study that they normally do. So now they're like, uh-oh, how many other patients, how many other patients who are brain dead are actually able to do things like that, and we just never tested it.
They're just struggling to be able to control their...
So it's so complicated.
I was blown away by some of this, because... being brain dead, sometimes your heart stops. We can get the heart going again. People who are brain dead have come back, and sometimes, they take the ventilator off. All right, put them in a body bag, and all of a sudden hey, get me out of here. What are you doing? So I mean, there's a lot of factors to some of that. So I understand there's some difficult situations here. One of the things they pointed out is with drugs, alcohol, and hypothermia. All these can slow breathing to undetectable levels and all sorts of things. So are people really not breathing or what? Now, if somebody wants to try to use this argument and say, well, maybe Jesus wasn't dead on the cross and all that, I mean, that's when it becomes absurd. I mean, if you just consider he was up all night praying, he was tortured by the Romans. A lot of times people think 40 lashes minus 1, 39. No, that's what the Jews did. If you think this is the Romans that were doing it, they could flog someone until they were dead. So we don't know how many times Jesus was flogged. Probably a lot more than what the Jews would ever have done. Then he's put on a cross. And they stabbed. Nobody wants to recreate that and say, oh, maybe he didn't.
And when he came back to life again, he wasn't a half corpse dragging around, barely alive. Like, he was alive. He was eating with people.
Walls.
He was talking to people. But what I thought was interesting, towards the end of the article, they start talking about these different people who've been cryogenically frozen, hoping someday they'll be able to bring them back to life.
Disney, right?
Whatever. So the rumor says. And these people trying to really cheat death, right? Like, I can maybe die now, and then they can bring me back later. But like Hebrews says, it's appointed for a man to die once, and after that to face the judgment. There is no magical fountain of youth that we'll find here on earth that will sustain us. We will someday. The only way to have eternal life is by putting your faith and trust in Christ, who came to save us and save us from the penalty of death.
And there's something significant to all that. People recognize that death is a bad thing. They realize that. See, death is the punishment for sin. That goes all the way back to the early chapters of Genesis. Why is death a bad thing? Because of it's the punishment. And we deserve to be punished for our sin from an infinite creator. So, Jesus Christ stepping into history and dying and being buried and resurrecting, that's the way to be saved for all eternity.
Instead of hunting for medical technology that will somehow make us live forever, we need to be, obviously we fight against the temporary effects of the curse as best we can. Ultimately, though, we will die. And the only way to escape that final judgment is by putting your faith and trust in Christ and what he's done for you in his death and resurrection.
Interesting article, though. I do encourage
it was,
people to read that one.
Very interesting article. All right, think we got time to do this last one? We can say we got through all of them?
Sure.
About a minute. So this one also comes from New Scientist. Geneticists are writing the rule book for creating gene-edited babies. So on Answers News a while back, last year I think, we talked about the maverick scientist in China who gene-edited 2 baby girls who were born, so that was a huge deal. Scientists were in uproar, the general public was in uproar about that. So in response to him going down this maverick trail, they created the really short name here, International Commission on the Clinical Use of Human Germline Genome Editing, to basically start laying out some guidelines, some international guidelines to kind of get some rules to this whole idea of gene editing.
Rein some people in, I think.
And to try and caution people, slow down. We are nowhere close to being ready to edit the germline. Germline is the genes that will be passed on to the next generation.
Right. And they use a technology called CRISPR, and I know we've talked about it a number of times.
before.
There's good aspects to it and bad aspects,
Certainly.
obviously, to it. But a lot of people don't realize that, when it goes in and does some editing, I mean, it sometimes edits things in a way that they don't mean to.
And they just found out that it's
huge chunks of
20% of the DNA might be deleted in this. They just found out in this new study. So
and even using other methods, it could be the same. We just don't know. It's too early to really tell.
Yeah. So they're urging caution. And one of the things I thought was interesting here, because they give two reasons why we don't need to be doing this yet. The first reason is we don't know if CRISPR is safe yet, so we should not be doing it on humans, particularly germline that'll be passed on. We don't know if it's safe. And the second thing was they said there's no need for it because almost, and this is quoting from the article, almost all serious genetic diseases can be prevented by screening the genomes of IVF embryos before implanting them in the uterus. Which sounds great until you think about what that actually means. They're not preventing serious genetic diseases. What they're doing is screening embryos that are created for IVF, in vitro fertilization, and they're saying this one has good genes, this one has good genes, oh, this one doesn't. We'll let this baby die and we'll implant these ones. They're not preventing anything. They're preventing the child from growing up with that particular genetic defect, whatever it may be. They're not preventing a genetic defect. So you've got to be watching for those kind of things when you're reading through these articles and thinking through biblically that really what we're dealing with a human life here. This baby, this tiny embryo is a human made in God's image. And we don't just discard them because this baby has a genetic disorder. We welcome that child into our family and help them live a full life as much as possible with their particular...
We all have the worst disorder, that it's the sin, the sin nature inside of us, and that's the worst thing. But Christ is the salvation.
I do want to recommend a book here. This is Always Ready from Dr. Greg Bahnsen. We sell this on our website. Again, that's Always Ready. If you were to search our website, there's also a DVD that comes up, Always Ready by Ken Ham. They are on different subjects, same title. But this is a powerful book. We're in a culture where we're seeing all these different news items, and people are saying, well, maybe we can just stay neutral on this. Actually, you can't be neutral. You're either for Christ or against him. And what this book is it's showing you how to do apologetics, how to defend the faith, and it's a great starting point to really dive into all that. And this has been a powerful book for me and a lot of my colleagues. Always Ready, Dr. Greg Bahnsen.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, on that note, we are out of time. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you can join us next week for the next episode of Answers News.
God bless.
God bless.